Welcome to the Business Wealth Blueprint, where we teach business owners how to build generational wealth with ease. First, by optimizing their business, and then by investing their money for generations to come. I hope you join us as we build your wealth one episode at a time.
What are we talking about today?
Well, dude, I think we should get into credit.
Okay.
But first of all, I want to ask a few questions. What the hell is credit? And is it important? Do we need it? Because according to Dave Ramsey, you don't need credit at all to survive in the world.
Isn't that credit thing where if you say something bad about the government and your credit score drops and then you can't move into certain apartments or have your kids in places?
Yeah.
Schools?
Maybe in China.
Oh, that's right. That's the
a social credit score.
Credit score. Okay,
right.
This is a different credit.
Yes, this is the credit that allows you to go out and buy stuff, folks. That allows banks to rate you and make decisions about you, whether you like it or not, based off of some system that these credit bureaus put together.
What if I had
want to
an
talk about that.
who ruined my credit?
Oh my gosh, story of my life, dude.
What if I had?
That's exactly what happened.
What if I'm incompetent and just ruined my credit? What if I have a bad score right now?
Then what people are going to do is look at you poorly from these credit scores, and it's going to affect all kinds of decisions you're going to make in your life, from the cars you buy to the house you're trying to improve for.
Okay.
So let's start with what the hell credit is.
Okay. What is it?
Well, apparently, back in the day, and there's three types. You have TransUnion, you have Equifax, and you have Experian. These bureaus came together, decided to create some sort of a financial rating for you so that a bank or a lender or someone who might have some financial decisions over or consumer decisions over you could rate you as a safe risk versus a risky risk.
Right.
And these...
If I loan this guy money, how likely am I going to get paid? How likely am I going to get paid back?
Yes.
Basically.
And once those bureaus came into existence, it has changed the way America thrives and Americans thrive in their daily life, right? Or let's say in most cases not thrive, because if you have a bad credit score, it can make all the difference of a yes versus a no.
Right.
So let's dive in that a little bit. Is credit important?
I think credit's extremely important. It can definitely affect you, it can hurt you and I was joking earlier about what apartment you're gonna move into, but a lot of applications for real estate, if you're gonna move into an apartment complex or a house, they might check your credit.
But Dave Ramsey says truly, don't cut up your credit cards. Don't rely on credit in life. Why would he say something like that?
Well, so Dave Ramsey's speaking to 90% of the population, and those listeners probably aren't the listeners who are listening to our podcast. But a lot of people, when they reach Dave Ramsey status and they find out about him, may have completely screwed up their life. And even if you are one of those listeners and are listening to us right now, we're going to kind of go into what makes up your credit score, why it's important, and then
if you ruin it, how to fix it.
Yeah,
right?
or if it's currently ruined.
Yeah.
Because we know one of the people on our team, she has an ex-husband who made some poor financial choices and ruined her credit.
Absolutely.
And it's easy to dig out of. It takes time. It's simple to dig out. It's not easy.
Sure. So living life without credit is possible. And according to Dave Ramsey, there is benefits to doing that. Let's give some credit where credit's due, right? There is.
I see what you did there.
There is some. I appreciate that. There is some, I would say, peace of mind that comes with not ever having to worry about a credit score and leveraging credit and having credit cards and managing finances in that way. Absolutely. But do you think it's truly possible for the day-to-day listener, and more importantly for our listeners who want to invest far beyond just owning your house, having no credit card debt, and paying for all your things in cash?
It is not impossible, but it is extremely, extremely unlikely.
Or implausible.
Yeah.
Wow. And why do you say that?
So a lot of it comes down to just the way institutions work. Also, if you can borrow money, then you can make money from nothing. You can make money from someone else's money. So a good way to put this is the very basic average listener can relate to this, but your credit score is going to determine how much it costs you to borrow money.
Mm-hmm.
So the average person can just internalize this right now. If you, and this is the fundamental series, so we're at the very beginning. This is the
beginning of the end.
This is the beginning of the end. This is the last thing we talk about before we get into crazy stuff.
Right.
And it's going to be a tool we use a lot, which is why we're talking about it. We saved the best for last. If you, let's say we're in the Midwest, I'm going to buy a $100,000 house. Do you have $100,000 to go buy that house?
Well, no.
Okay, so you're gonna probably go to a bank or a government institution
Or a mortgage lender or broker, yeah.
and they're gonna say, give me, $10,000 or $20,000, and then I'll give you the rest to buy that house.
Sure.
Okay.
What's wrong with that?
That interest rate that you borrow the money at is going to be determined by market factors and stuff, but one of the big ones is your credit score.
Oh.
How risky are you based on your past decision on getting future credit on the likelihood of you paying them back? And so if your credit score is bad, what it tells people, or banks or institutions, is this person may not be very trustworthy. And so you should have higher risk. So you're probably going to get a higher interest rate, which is going to cost you more to buy that $100,000 house.
Or you're so young you haven't developed credit and they don't know you,
and so you're
going to pay the price on that.
Bingo.
Isn't that crazy?
And so even if you are Dave Ramsey, one of the things he does talk about is buying your personal residence. And your credit score will determine what your interest rate is. And so that is a really important thing.
And that's the step in his...
but it's very likely to influence it.
Absolutely. That's the step in his system that I could never wrap my head around. I'm like, I'm the average person doing good things in life. Let's say I have a good savings strategy. I don't utilize credit for anything, meaning I can afford my lifestyle, which is very fiscally responsible.
Right.
How the hell am I going to buy a house when no one has $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 cash on hand saved up? And if you have no credit profile, no one's going to touch you. And this is a true story. I have a very, very close family member who is probably the most responsible financial person I know and has more integrity to pay people back and do what's right, has his savings put into place. He never built credit. And so when he wanted to buy a home specifically, they were like, no, not a chance. We don't know you. You have no credit. It's not even bad credit. You just have none. Yeah. And they wouldn't touch him.
You're a ghost.
Right, since you're a ghost.
Who are you?
Yeah. And here's the reality, folks. No matter how responsible he was the guy you'd want to lend money to. He would sell everything he owned to pay you back.
Yep.
He would never screw anybody, but he had nothing for them to draw off of or pose risk off of to even lend him a dime. They wouldn't even lend him like $10,000. And he had like 110 grand saved in cash. And he's like, look, I have a massive down payment. I'll pay half of the thing that I want to borrow, 50% down. And they said, no, sorry, we don't know you. We can't work with someone who doesn't have a credit profile.
Exactly.
That blew my mind. That changed my whole perspective on doing the Dave Ramsey method the way it is laid out, because it freaked me out. I want to be able to buy a home and be responsible with credit on top of that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's so critical. Just fundamentally, credit scores impact your life whether you want them to or not. So we're going to get into a little bit of things on how to improve your credit score, where you're at. But the basics of the credit score is there's a score that people are given. Now, when people say credit score, I can't remember what it is, but there's a bunch of FICO numbers. And actually what we see, like if you used to be Credit Karma, or if you have a lot of banks are giving you your credit score, that is one very specific credit score. You actually have like 4 or 5 or 7 or something like that. Your overall health is going to determine what that is over time. So,
and there's many factors we're going to go over in this episode, and we're going to keep this quick and concise, obviously. And we're more pushing the idea that to become a savvy investor or ever get to FU money status, you have to have and leverage credit.
Yes, you're going to want to make money. So let's go back to the $100,000 house example. Here's why it's so important. If you buy your house for $100,000 and you just live in there, nothing fancy, and then you turn around and you sell your house 10 years later because you get another job or whatever. Now that's $50,000, for $150,000. You've made $50,000. You made that money not from the money that you made. You made the money from the bank's money. And so that is the very base thing. Same thing. Let's say you have a car. Most people are used to credit in a bad way. You borrow money to pay for the car. The car goes down in value. You also paid money to buy that car because you didn't have $40,000. Yeah. Okay. The opposite is buying a house or an asset, which we'll get into that later. Is if you buy a house, usually it's going to go up in value. When you sell it, you've made money. Okay, let's say it's only been the 5 years or the 10 years. I mean, you didn't pay off $100,000 in 10 years.
Right.
You've probably only paid, $20,000 off. And so now all of a sudden you're making this spread between the $20,000 that you put down what you've paid off over the time, and then what the house is worth because of just market fact. And so you would not be able to do that without a credit score. And so if you do not get loans or debt or notes or whatever the term is, then the likelihood that you're going to be able to make gobs of money, or remember later we're going to get into what the rich know that we don't know. A lot of it comes down to credit. They're using OPM, other people's money. They're using a bank's money to make themselves more money. And we're going to get into crazy tactics, and I mean, I say crazy. They're simple, direct tactics, but the fundamental of all of that's going to be your good credit score.
So, quick question: what are some of the things we're rated on or judged on that builds one's credit? And by the way, folks, we have some really, really great infographics that we are going to put on HughCarnahan.com.
On the top left, you're going to see free resources,
yes.
And then you're going to see a link to high-level investing. So
yeah, so anytime we reference certain infographics or materials, it always lives there, and it's free for the public.
So the gist of it is, the worse your credit score is, which the credit score is a number between 300 and 850.
Oh, fancy.
If you're 850, I think above 800 is considered a perfect credit score.
Yeah.
And then anything below that, like well, I think now it's like 700 to 800 is considered very good credit.
740 to 800 is very good. 700 to 740 is good, and then down the scale.
We should just know, below 740, you're not in good shape.
Yeah.
For
a lot of things, and your interest rate drastically changes when you drop below 740.
And most people aren't there. And so we're going to talk about if you're in the 300s to 500s, that's great. You and I have a mutual friend who lost everything, or everything happened in the 2008 recession, and they were like, "I'm done with the credit system. I'm out. I'm going to live off the grid," and he did.
Yeah.
Him and his whole family did.
Yeah.
And then flash forward to today, we try to help him buy a house. He's got the money, and he could not buy a house because he didn't exist.
Yep.
And that's another story of that example. But here's what goes into your credit score. So 35% of your credit score is your payment history.
Ooh, better do good on that.
So you should always, just out of the gate, always pay the minimum balance.
Yeah.
You may owe $2,000 your credit card. Minimum payment's probably $25.
Pay it.
Pay it.
Okay. Next.
So 35% of your credit history is determined by your payment history. Do you have any late payments? If the answer is no, then that is going to be a very good determining factor. The next one is 30%. It is outstanding debt. How much do you have borrowed?
Revolving balances is another way they put it.
Yep. And so that's going to be the next 30%. So already out of the gate, we've got 65% of your total credit score in those two things. Okay.
Yep.
15% is going to be your length of
it's always about the
history
length.
credit. 15%.
Yeah.
Okay, so Dane, I was born in 1990.
You're a young buck.
My credit score has a history that goes back to 1988.
Oh, that's weird.
It is weird. How did that happen?
Well, and you probably know a little bit more about this, but how they start your credit profile goes back before you were even born, right? Like, and then it catches up to you.
No, my parents, one of the greatest gifts they ever gave me was they had a credit card, and when I was, one or zero,
no way.
They put me on the credit card as an additional user.
I see. Interesting.
And so they had opened that credit card in 1988, 2 years before I was born. They still had that credit card. And that ties us into the next one, the length of credit history, the 15%.
Yep.
How long have you had your credit? So Dave Ramsey will tell you to cancel cards you don't use. That's going to hurt your credit score.
Absolutely.
Because
there's no history.
Exactly. Because if you had let's say you had two credit cards.
Yeah.
You have had one for 10 years.
Yep.
You've had one for 2 years, and you got into trouble with your credit card that has 10 years of history. And then, guess what? You pay it, you just close the credit card for 15 years of history. 10 years of history. Your length of history credit just disappears. So don't close your cards. You want to have that. Okay.
And be aware, listeners, okay? Sometimes the credit card company will notice that it's an inactive account that you've held a credit limit with, even if it's paid off, for too long, and they will just shut it down. That happened to me, and I had a card that I had for 17 years. I just never used it.
Yep.
Because I was keeping it for the history. And they shut it down because I'd moved, and the forwarding of mail and whatever, I didn't find out in time. It was gone, and then it pinged my credit negatively, and I didn't even do anything wrong.
And so for me, length of history is so important that I have I rarely ever close a credit card. But when I do, and I make sure they stay open, because I'll put a single bill, like Netflix, $8 or whatever, 13 bucks. Netflix auto drafts to that credit card, and then I auto draft to full pay that credit card off.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing that expressly to keep my card open. I don't do anything else with it. I forgot about it. I don't have the physical card anymore. Yeah. It just does that one thing.
Well, that benefits you in two ways also, okay? It's not just length of history. The more accounts that you have go to your borrowing ability, your credit limits. And that, with the combination of history, is what really creates a robust credit profile.
Two more factors, and we're going to go back to what you're kind of getting into, is outstanding debt. So there's types of credit. Types of credit is, do you have just credit card debt?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a credit card and a house loan?
Oh, yeah.
Do you have a credit card and a car loan and a house loan?
Right.
That's going to be 10% of it. And then the last one is new credit. So what's a common thing that you hear people that are going to go car shopping or,
oh my God,
what was one thing that they're afraid of doing?
Pulling their credit.
Why?
Because it shows as a pull, right, and that can also ding your credit supposedly.
Yeah, it'll drop your credit, but it's only worth 10%. And so don't be afraid of it if you're genuinely doing it. Now there's laws, I think you can, within a week, you can draw multiple times, and it's not multiple times.
They said that, and I have done that in the past, and it marked me as a hard pull every time within that week. So be careful how accurate that is.
And you may or may not be able to, but that stuff will fall off within like 90 days. So again, the biggest one is payment history, that's 35%. Then it's outstanding debt, how much you owe, which we're going to get into the factor of how much you have pulled on your credit.
Mm-hmm.
Your length of history is 15%, and then 10% is types of credit, and 10% is hard inquiries or new credit. Did you open a new credit card?
I will say this too, and I don't know how much they weigh this, but it's definitely something that's come up is school loans. And that might be debt to income ratio, and so your borrowing amount might be reduced. But they may not come out and say, but in some way, that is an indicator, you guys, in how they look at your credit profile. Because if you have $85,000 in student loans, you may have a credit score of 740, 750, but they'll still limit your ability to lend X amount on top of whatever that would be, because those come into play. That's all I'm saying. I've seen it happen to myself and other people.
So that's your 30% outstanding debt. And so you have types of credit, right? So student loans will play into that. Okay, you have student loans, probably okay. You have just a whole bunch of random gambling debt, high debt, it's probably worse.
Gambling.
But the outstanding debt, we're gonna talk about a little bit. We were getting into a little bit. So there's two things. One, it's how much debt do you have? And how much, compared to how much line of access to what credit utilization you have.
Yes.
So let's use an example. If I only have $10,000 of credit and I spend $8,000 to go buy renovation material to go renovate a house, that shows me that's the only credit I have as an 80% credit utilization. And that is that 30% marker that scares people.
Yes.
It's not great.
Yeah.
Now let's take me again. I think I have $120,000 of credit. I pull that same $8,000. Well, they're taking the ratio of $8,000 divided by 120, something teeny tiny, and they're going to say it's the same. But to you and me, it's still $8,000.
Yeah. But
to them, he's using a teeny tiny percent. I think the break even is if you use above 30% of your credit utilization.
Yeah.
So if you have $10,000 on a line of credit, you use more than 30%, you're going to get dinged. Your student debt is just a debt that's thrown on top of it. And then they're going to also look at your debt to income ratio. That's going to be more for banks and stuff. How much money do you bring in versus how much debt do you owe? Mm-hmm. Debt including a house, debt including your student debt.
Yes.
Debt including your car.
And your living expenses.
That is going to then determine what credit score or what rating you get for an interest rate.
Well, and this is why
tons of factors.
One of the reasons, and the point I was trying to make earlier, which you're getting into with utilization, it doesn't make sense to close old accounts because even if you don't use it, but it has a $4,000 limit, a $10,000 limit,
Bingo.
it adds to your utilization ratio. Does that make sense?
So we're going to transition now from what is a credit score into what can you do about a bad credit score, or how do you improve your credit score? And so the first one, again, 35% of everything is rated on your payment history.
Yeah.
Do you have late payments?
Yeah.
I think it was someone was telling, I think it was Berkshire Hathaway. It was no, it wasn't. It was some big, massive company that had millions of dollars out there line of credit as a company, right? And they missed their payment because the office was shut down. Not him, but the credit card office was shut down. And so the auto draft didn't work or something. And so they went from like a 815, perfect credit score, and they dropped into the 600s, the high 600s. One single missed payment had nothing to do with anything.
Crazy.
All it was that one thing. Now, because of their payment history, then all this big payment history, in one instance, it dropped a lot. Well, they called it, they couldn't dispute it, whatever. They just said, screw you, your credit's bad. So they just waited. 6 months later, it was back up into the high 700s. And a year later, it was back up to the 800s again.
This happened to my wife. USAA had some sort of random old policy, like a personal property policy that they billed to some card we don't use, and it was getting mailed to Japan when we were out there. She missed that payment one time out of the whatever 10 years she had it, and it dropped her score like 60 points. And she was like, are you kidding me? There was no alert, there was nothing.
Right.
It was really in a way that, one, it was completely accidental on her part, and two, when she tried to dispute it, they were unwilling to reverse that one payment with all that history. So you got to be careful. The creditors are out for themselves. I just want to make that clear.
And the good news is it dropped it by that much. It dropped it instantly. So it was like one day, one month.
It freaked her out.
But over the course of 6 months and a year, you can repair that pretty quickly.
About a year, yep.
So over the course of a year, so if you're listening to this and you're like, I have shit credit, I'll never be able to do any of the things that these guys say on this podcast. That's bullshit.
Yeah, that is true. It's bullshit.
That's an excuse you're making.
Yeah.
You can start right now and just don't miss a payment.
Yes.
And you can say, well, Hugh, I'm $80,000 behind. What are you talking about? Make your minimum payment.
Yeah.
If you just make your minimum payment for everything,
yep,
you can do that. And we're going to get into the avalanche method, and we're going to get into the snowball method for paying debt off. But step one, fix your credit history. Just make sure you pay everything on minimum payments.
And I will give a real life example of this. Since I moved to Missouri, my credit score was like 800 or something when I first got here. Out of things that happen in life, I think we missed a payment or whatever happened, my credit has also dropped as low as 620 at one point, okay? For someone like me, that freaked me the hell out, and for Kim. And so when you sit here and you listen to this and you're like, oh, it's great because these guys do all the things right and they have all this ability to invest and they're growing wealth. In real life, your credit will take hits, will take dings, things happen. But since then, I've built almost exactly right to where I was when I began, because you can repair your credit just as easily as you can mess it up. Okay, back in the day, you couldn't do that, by the way. It would take 3 to 5 years to repair something that you can do now in 6 months to a year.
Yep.
And in a very short time, we were right back to where I started. But I was like anyone, I was like, whoa, it's gonna mess with my whole,
so it's not too late,
my whole life and like my ability to buy. It didn't do any of that. It just, I had to get back on track with some things. Your credit will fluctuate. You will take some hits, and that's okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, step one, really simply, make sure you're paying the minimum payments. Step two.
Actually, I think it was utilization, because I have a 20-year payment history perfect.
Well, probably what happened for you was that you bought a house. And so now suddenly,
3 houses.
Bought 3 houses in a year. Suddenly you look really good on paper.
My utilization went up, skyrocketed, and I remember all of a sudden I was like, whoa, I'm at a 620. I couldn't believe it.
So that's the next phase, right? 35% is payment history. 30% is how much utilization you have. So right there, you've got, again, this is back to the $8,000 example. Personally, I never, ever, ever close any of my credit cards. I will always make sure there's a $10 transaction, a $5 transaction per month, something negligible, and I make sure it's paid off. That's how I have $200,000. Here's the fundamental thing to improve your credit score. When you don't need credit, go open more credit cards. Now that is a terrifying piece of advice for anyone on Dave Ramsey's because they have no idea what they're doing. But if you can't handle credit, this is not for you. But if you can handle credit, when you don't need credit, go open more.
Yeah, meaning you're not looking to leverage it, you're not buying something.
You're just opening a credit card.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
We're going to get an episode more advanced side. It's going to be credit card churning. But I have 120,000 or 150. I honestly don't know. I have a very, very high credit score. Why? Because I often do $30,000 real estate transactions.
Yeah.
That I need to pull in renovation costs and pay for materials and pay for the contractor. And for me and us as a company, if we have $100,000 or $150,000 and we pull 30 grand, not a big deal. If we have $100,000 of credit and we pull $30,000, kind of not a big deal.
Right.
If we have 80,000 and we pull 30,000, now we're dipping into that. My credit score drops, interest rates go higher, it becomes poor. So how did I get 120? That's insane, Hugh. You can go buy a car with that, or a crazy supercar. Well, the way I did that was every time I could get more credit, I would open another credit card.
Yeah.
And
Or ask to raise your limits. People forget that all the time. You can call in your bank for any credit card and say, can I raise my limit?
Hey, I've been paying for X amount. It's usually about every 6 months. Now, when you raise your limit, it counts as new credit, so your credit score will drop because you're asking for more credit.
Right.
But you're building it over time. And one of the best things I ever heard was Kevin Paffrath, your credit score. So he bought this shovel. It's a German-made shovel. It's the most beautiful shovel. I don't know, whatever.
Sounds beautiful.
And he's talking about the shovel, and it's hanging in his garage, and it's wonderful. But he's never used the shovel. It's just this beautiful, pristine, German crafted engineering shovel. But that's not what shovels are made for. Shovels are made to be used. So when he starts digging, and he's a landscaper, he's digging, he's moving rocks around, there's dings on the shovel, the shovels get scratched, but it's still a very well-built shovel. Is it as pretty as it was when it was hanging in the wall in his garage? No. But shovels are made to be used, and so is your credit score. The more you use your credit score, right? Now your credit score is higher.
Oh, yeah.
But that year you bought 3 houses, it wasn't.
Yeah.
But if your credit score wasn't high enough before you bought those 3 houses, you wouldn't have been able to buy your house.
Well, and then you add consumer debt to it, right? Because that can quickly, when you're using other lines to grab materials to do this, and what we're doing as smart as we can to add to the picture, it will definitely take a toll on your credit.
And if we go back to the beginning, we said, how are we making money with other people's money?
Yes.
And so what Dane just alluded to, which is an advanced strategy, which can be a risky strategy if you do it wrong, is he bought a house with the bank's money, and then he uses credit cards, a different bank, to then finance the renovations.
Yeah.
Dane didn't pull money out of his pocket to do this. He paid the interest on it. So let's say every month he's paying $500, $700 a month. Well, after the 6-month period of renovations, he's paid $700 times 6 months, right? That's the only thing he's actually paid out of his pocket. When the house is done, which again, we're going to get into that later, now all of a sudden, he gets to refinance, he gets way more money, it's a fancy house, he sells it, whether he flips it, whether he keeps it, it's now paying him. He didn't raise the money to buy the house, and he didn't raise the money to fix the house. He got it from credit. And so that's why we're saying to treat your credit like a shovel. A
Great
beautiful
analogy.
German shovel.
Yeah.
Maybe like not a pre-40s shovel, maybe like a post-50s Western, East German shovel, whatever.
Exactly.
Where it's got good, well, you know what? A post-40s Japanese shovel. So 50s, 1950s or before. Nice. Japanese shovels are affordable, but they're still high quality.
Sure.
Maybe some creature comforts in there.
Yeah.
But they're made to be used.
Yeah.
They're
I
not
love that
made
though.
To just be pretty hanging on the wall.
Right.
So
and be freaked out every time you want to, pull have your credit pulled for this or that. It is to be used. I love that because again, my wife, she's the person who never wants to touch it and grow it to 800 or above. The reality is when we had to touch it and we did all these things for 6 months, to the banks and to the creditors, it looked like we were maxed out on everything, but it was all their money. To me, I paid a fraction of the cost because I was able to use the shovel correctly.
You strategically knew that you were going to take a hit on your credit score, but because you had already previously built it up so high, you used everyone else's money to do what you needed. When you were done, you paid everything back, your credit score went up.
Yeah.
So you're good. Credit utilizations. If you're above 30% utilization, pay your credit score down. If you have like 20 different student loans, you can get a loan consolidation. If you have a HELOC and you live in a house, maybe you can pull money and you take that money from your house, right, with a cash out refinance, and you say, I'm borrowing this at 6%, 7%. My student loans are 9%, 10%. My credit card debt's at 25%. Use your house debt, which is secured by your real estate assets, so you're gonna get a lower interest rate, and go pay off the high interest debt. Boom, it's gone.
Yeah, which we've done several times.
It's not really gone. You traded places. Your house debt went up by 20 grand, but you paid 20 grand of credit cards off. Well, guess what? They're gonna, usually that responds, the types of credit matter. So again, there's a lot to this, and this will be a very critical and important thing as you move forward, building credit, doing that. Okay, we'll leave with one example. Let's say you can't get credit. You've never had credit. You can get a secured credit card. That's number one.
And quickly describe what that is.
Okay, a secured credit card is when, let's say you have $500. You go to a bank and you say, I want to open a secured credit card. You put $500 in the account and they give you a credit card with $500 limit. You start using that over and over and over. That starts to build your credit history. Almost anybody can do this. Okay. Next one, and this is actually how my mom built credit back in the 1980s.
Oh, wow.
Right? We're in the Midwest.
Mm-hmm.
She's Asian. There's white people in the Midwest.
Huh.
They're not going to give
Weird.
this Asian money, especially not a woman in
Yeah.
the 80s.
Oh, yeah.
So what do? My dad co-signed with her in her name and her social security number, right? She got a bank loan. She then, I think they pulled like 10 grand out. The 80s was huge. They did nothing with the money. They pulled the 10 grand out. They put it in a different bank's bank account. And the only thing they did was they just paid, over the course of a year, they paid that entire loan off. At the end of that year, they did it again.
Smart.
And so they didn't go buy anything with it. They just kept the money in the account. They paid the difference of the interest rate.
Yeah. So
if they pulled 10 grand, then they owed $1,800 back. They owed $11,800 back at the end of that year. If it was 11%, that's all they did.
Yeah.
And they did that twice, I think. My mom then had an established credit history, and then they were able to go do stuff.
I love this example because the point I wanted to make as we close out this episode is harnessing credit as a shovel or a tool takes discipline. Don't let anyone else tell you otherwise.
It's dangerous.
That's
it
why
can hurt you.
it can absolutely hurt you.
That's why Dave Ramsey
says don't do it. Just avoid it.
Dave Ramsey has $1 billion behind him. He has hundreds of millions of dollars every year that people are paying him. People are paying him to learn not to do this.
Yeah.
He's making so much money because people are so bad with credit.
Yes.
He's talking to the 90%.
Yes.
You're listening to this podcast. You're here to learn money for normal people,
right?
And then how the rich, what they know, can translate to us and what we can do about it.
And it's such a slippery slope. My wife was guilty of this. I remember the first time she got her credit card in college. She's like, "Oh my gosh, Jane, I was approved for $1,500." I'm like, "Kim, don't do it. I don't think you're ready. You've never had credit before." I had credit for 10, 15
18
years.
or something like that?
Yeah.
18-year-old kid?
I had been building it over time, and she was so excited by it. And immediately, and she always had reserve cash saved, and she spent it all and was always kind of behind with that credit profile until the last 10 years she's done incredibly well. But the point is, it's easy to misunderstand what credit is, to misuse it as a tool. It takes extreme discipline, especially when leveraging it for investing and creating FU money. I want to be very clear about that, because once you master these fundamentals, you build the discipline. You're disciplined enough to have an emergency savings account and invest in things like VTI, like we just talked about. That probably means you are ready to use credit for the tool that it was designed to be, and it will take you farther, faster than anything else.
When we, as listeners, when we can leverage other people's money to make us more money, that's an investment.
It is.
That's very powerful.
Right.
When we don't do that, when we're using it to buy what we want, it's very, very dangerous. Very, very dangerous.
Yeah.
And most people, and that's why Dave Ramsey is so successful, because none of us were ever taught about money. We don't know anything about it. And the byproduct is we went and bought what we want. We wanted those pairs of shoes, and we wanted that car. We wanted this thing, and now we're in hot water. Guess what? I'm not gonna buy the shoes. I'm not gonna buy that car. I'm going to borrow 100 grand to go buy a bunch of crack houses. And then I'm gonna take that money, the $150 a month that I'm cleared on the back end, I'm gonna do it 10 more times. And then when I have $1,500 a month, then I'm gonna go buy the car with that $1,500 a month.
Right.
That's the difference, and credit score is so critical to that.
Well, you heard it here, folks. Credit's important, especially if you are on the FU money track of living. And we wanted to share some of these as we wrap these episodes up. We're going to do a recap.
Reminder, you can always ask us questions. We're also going to be having some live conversations where people call in, and we're going to answer their questions live on the air.
Yeah.
And we don't get everything right. You guys are always so smart. We're always humbled. So head on over to HughCarnahan.com. Check out the top. It's going to have free resources. You can ask us questions. It'll be under the high-level investing tab. And we're super excited to have you here, guys. Anything else?
And we're really looking forward to getting into the next segment, because that means it's the fun, crazy stuff that a lot of people don't know about, and it can either really wrap you up in the wrong things, or it can take your wealth building to the next level.
Guys, this is the last episode before we go into what the rich people know.
Yeah.
This is where we're at, where it's like, okay, most people agree on this stuff.
Right.
Everything else beyond this point is subjective. It's controversial.
Sure.
It's controversial based on personal experience and what country
Absolutely.
you're in. So we're super excited, guys. Make sure you subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much for sticking around to watch. Please help us by watching this next video.